Welcome to Climate at Your Service, a Climate Europe 2 podcast where we delve into the world of climate services. I'm your host, Dr. Stacey New, a climate scientist from the Met Office in the UK, and I'm thrilled to guide you through this exploration of how climate information can empower decision making and action across different sectors and communities around the world. In previous episodes, we've talked about how climate services support cities and how they're used across agriculture and food systems. Today we're shifting that focus and asking how do we make climate science and climate services meaningful, accessible and empowering for young people, and what does it look like when education, real-world climate challenges and practical decision making come together. So I'm very pleased to be joined by Learn Mokkenstorm from KNMI, so the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Institute. I've gone with the kind of English breakdown of that. I tried doing the Dutch. It wouldn't have gone well. So yeah, welcome to the podcast. I thought we could start by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about what you do. And I thought as this is a podcast about the youth of today, maybe you could talk a little bit about your education, maybe your university and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me today. So my name is Lona. I work at KNMI and I am a physical geographer, actually. I started about 5 years ago at KNMI as an operational forecaster for the maritime sector. And now for about 1.5 years, I'm a climate advisor. So I work in climate services. I mostly help partners with using climate data, climate information, but our team also does a lot with the general public. So we do a lot of educational activities. We go to festivals. We give lectures for students. So it's a nice combination of work.
Great. I really like having you on the podcast because you're a physical geographer and so am I. And yeah, it's always nice to meet a fellow geographer in the climate area. So yeah, I guess like I might just talk a little bit about my background. So as I said, physical geographer, and very much kind of a wildfire expertise. So that's my PhD. And then I somehow landed in climate services, doing very much what you're doing, is like kind of that translation of climate information and going to schools and visiting, doing a lot of kind of, yeah, and trying to empower young people to kind of take up geography in particular, but other related subjects. So in the Met Office, physics and maths are kind of a lot of the backgrounds, but increasingly we're seeing kind of social science come through, which is really cool. And so, you know, at uni I did human geography and physical geography, and I always thought myself very much as a physical geographer, but the more I do climate services work, I'm kind of lost that sense of that who I am. I'm kind of like straddling that interface between human and physical geography. So yeah, I don't know like whether you felt that yourself, kind of not losing that physical geography aspect, but like moving more towards the like human social side.
Yeah, I think it's very, very helpful actually to have both perspectives there. My bachelor's degree was very much interdisciplinary, so also including a little bit of even international studies, international relations, a little bit of law. And I think even though I don't do a lot with those topics right now, I think having a little bit of broader perspective, I guess, on the topic of climate change is very useful, especially if you maybe want to look a little bit more into how people respond to information or what they can do with it. So I think it's very helpful to not just focus on the physical part of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the UK we have an expression for geographers. They're a jack of all trades, master of none, because we often, I guess through our undergraduate degrees, we often do lots of different subjects. So a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of physics, a little bit of maths, do the social sciences. So I think that's our superpower, being a geographer, that interdisciplinary nature. Cool. Yeah, I guess we could move on to like the podcast itself. And when we met before, one thing you mentioned when we were kind of talking about what we wanted to discuss in this podcast was kind of the idea that if young people don't see an institution in like social media, that they might not really realize the breadth of what the organization does. So for example, you mentioned how KNMI might not be on some social media platforms, and wondered if we could maybe talk a little bit about how you think that changes how young people perceive the organization.
Yeah, so KNMI hasn't really been on television with the weather forecast for a lot of years. There's a lot of commercial weather agencies in Holland that cover that part of the weather forecast. And I think because of that, a lot of young people don't even know anymore what KNMI does, even though we make the models, we do the measurements, we're kind of at the basis of everything weather related here. And as you mentioned, we're also, because we're a government agency, we're also not allowed to go on certain social media platforms where a lot of young people are, and that makes it very difficult to reach them. So we've been, I mean, we have been very active on Instagram. We have our own designer now who is also making very cool visuals and videos about our data, and I think that really helps. But getting those visuals and videos to the people, that is still something I think we're navigating a bit.
Yeah, we've found that a bit as well at the Met Office. We've just started kind of going into creating TikToks and kind of trying to access that popular space. So a lot of kind of what we're doing is sharing the forecast, the weather forecasts, but in terms of kind of going into that climate space, it's kind of tackling misinformation and things like that. And we've seen a lot of traction through TikTok, and we've seen that especially that younger generation want that kind of, you know, that 10-second snippet that they can just listen to and watch and they go on to the next thing. So yeah, that's definitely something we're kind of focusing in on, is those kind of platforms like Instagram, TikTok. So yeah, I could definitely resonate with that. And I think that kind of brings up the question around how we make climate services relevant. I think in some aspects it's relatively easy to make weather relevant because it's something someone's experiencing every day. I think for us in climate services, it's how do we make that longer term change like relevant day to day. And if people aren't necessarily accessing those usual channels of maybe reading a report or, I don't know, watching the news or something, how do we access that generation? So is a 16-year-old really going to read a white paper or a report, and what are some of those different methods that we can access to help communicate that information?
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing is that we're trying to communicate very complex data, because maybe a weather forecast is a little bit more easy to understand and a little bit more directly relevant to your day-to-day life. So you want to make something that is easy to understand within seconds, so it's not swiped away on the phone or or something. But you also want to make it personal and show what it means for people in their day-to-day life. So what does climate change mean for my choice of where to live, or what does it mean for maybe my career choices or my holiday? I think making it relevant for the day-to-day life, that is, I think, the most important thing. But it's also very difficult because you're trying to communicate a very detailed and nuanced and complex issue. So it is, I think it's a challenge that probably many other colleagues across Europe will share with us.
I really like that idea around those kind of, I think when we chatted before, like those life moments you called them, and I really, really liked that. So it's like, you know, when people are choosing a first job or where to live, I know my colleague, when she was choosing a house in Exeter, she looked at all the flood forecast maps because she's a sea level scientist. So it was like, I want to know, like, is my house at risk? And when we bought our house, we got a survey through and it gave us all those different risks. And I think that's really actually quite nice to see that we are, as a generation, we are having to take into these things into account. And those kind of life moments is where this information really does make a difference. And I think communicating that is a way to forward, actually, is how it's going to impact you buying your first house, or even getting like insurance on your house is a very grown up thing to think about, but we've just had to do our house insurance again. And it's that impact of climate change, what flooding could have on that. And I think festivals is a really interesting thing as well. So Richard Betts at the Met Office does a lot of work at Glastonbury, and he is often at the festivals talking about climate impacts and reaching the young people through kind of cool things like festivals, which I'm very jealous of. But yeah, I don't know. Have you done anything around kind of going to festivals and community and climate change?
Yeah, so we have a big festival in Holland called Lowlands, and they have their own science program, and there's a lot of scientific organizations who present their research there. We haven't been there personally yet, but what we have done is we've been to a festival that is all about science, and it's for kids between 4 and 12, and that is very interesting as well because um, I guess these kids they probably don't know what KNMI is, but you still can have a conversation with them and you can ask them about what they know about the weather or what they know about climate. And I think especially in those conversations, it is important to not keep it light, but also give it a positive twist. Because if someone's at a festival enjoying themselves, you don't want to you don't want to approach them with this doom and gloom story. So I think it's also important to show the maybe the in a positive sense what they can do themselves or maybe what has already improved so far, and in that way it's also more easy to approach people, I think, but it is difficult.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me on to the next theme is around kind of the barriers. If we go in kind of doom and gloom, I think some people automatically kind of close off. Okay, there's nothing we can do, so what? But when we do find those people that do care about climate change, I think it's still hard in some cases for them to really engage with. We can't just give them graphs and loads of data. So that's kind of where climate services come in, is translating all that kind of complex information into like fun, positive ways of learning. And I think around that is some of the barriers around kind of accessibility, language, not just translating it into different spoken language, but that kind of technical jargon. And yeah, I just wondered if you had thoughts around how, as climate services scientists, we go about that, is translating that information in lots of different ways, and how we can kind of communicate that that complex climate information with kind of young people more easily.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that springs to mind is making stuff mobile friendly. So if you do communicate a graph or communicate data, you want to make sure that it's also readable on a smartphone or a tablet or whatever. You want to make it interactive and also tailored. I think I don't know if I still count as a young person, but if I sometimes go to a website and I have to go through several menus to find the data I'm looking for, that really annoys me. I just want to select the time period I'm interested in, select the variables, and just get the information I'm interested in. Then I think accessibility of language, as KNMI, we're trying to communicate mostly at a B1 level, so that should be understandable for high school students. That is still a challenge because you have a lot of jargon and like technical words. What we're now trying to do in a new platform, a data exploration platform we're developing, is kind of creating these dictionary tooltips. So if you hover over them with your mouse, you get there's a question mark, and you can see what unvalidated means. Because we show validated and unvalidated data. People probably don't know what that means if it's the first time they're visiting our website, but you also don't want to overload them with text. So we're kind of trying to layer the information in that way.
That's why I think, what makes a good climate science services scientist is making sure you don't have that jargon and that accessibility, exactly what you said, and making it short, sharp, and not too complex. And I really like the idea of just being able to toggle over a word, and just seeing that without having to click off. And I think that kind of brings me on to kind of that accessibility and the way in which we communicate onto something I'm very quite passionate about, is learning through play. So like you're saying, like mobile friendly, and related to that, there are a lot of great apps out there. So SMHI, for example, the Swedish Met Service, have some really great games where you're the mayor of a town and having to invest money and things like that, and that's a really great game. And we've recently had Matteo Menepace join the Met Office to run a session. I don't know if you've heard of the game Daybreak, but it's a board game where it's like fully cooperative. So you're not necessarily against each other. You're working together to decarbonize the world and create a resilient society and risk. And it kind of brings everyone together in like kind of that board game format to try and win and beat the game. But you're also learning about risk, decarbonisation, energy systems at the same time. And for me, I learn best through kind of that kind of play and competitive nature. For some people, that competition doesn't really work. But yeah, I wondered if you've got experience kind of maybe playing with some of these games, or if you've got thoughts around learning through play.
Yeah, so the SMHI game that you mentioned, I have once led it in. It was a workshop with, I think it was students. No, it was young professionals from the water sector, actually. And so we played the game and then also tried to assess kind of how the choices we made, what the consequences were. And I think it opened up some good discussions there. I think it's also a good way to show that climate change affects more professions than just the climate advisors, the climate researchers, because it also shows that, you know, if you're in politics, that it also poses questions to politicians or to spatial planners, or so it gives a little bit more context on why it is relevant, I guess, and also it makes you understand these challenges a bit better, I think. And the whole question of, if you make a big investment now, and it means the risk is lower in the further future, or are you gonna make a smaller investment and just take that risk? I think the question of how much risk are you willing to take as a society, I think that makes it very tangible in that way. I don't have a lot of experience with other games, but I think it's a very interesting way to interact a little bit with the topic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of safe space where if you make the wrong decision, it's a game at the end of the day. But you're also learning about what the risk is if you don't make the right decision. And I think that, like you said, it kind of puts you in a place of that those policymakers that you don't work with day to day, but you will work with through your work, or if you're just somebody who doesn't work in climate science and playing the game. I think it gives you that kind of like realistic idea of like what the decisions those people are having to make. For climate services scientists like us, like a lot of what we do is kind of that engagement. So we are learning the needs and the decisions that people are making. But I think, through gaming and you're actually put in that position, I think it's a really nice way to actually get an idea of some of these hard decisions people have to make, and that balancing of communities and kind of the energy system and economy and things like that. So that's why I like kind of playing these games, kind of that safe space to take risk but also whilst learning.
And it also shows the kind of the impact of these low probability, high impact events. Because I think we I was in a team that did like kind of a moderate investment in climate adaptation. We thought it would be fine, but I think after round one, our society had completely collapsed because of I think it was a extreme rain event or something. So it also makes it very. I think it makes you understand how to interact with these probabilities that are also associated with climate scenarios or with forecasts.
Yeah, I think we're actually trying to bring that into the way we engage with users when we're co-developing these climate services, is bringing in these decision gaming workshops so that we can communicate these high impact, low likelihood events with them, and doing it in a way that they can learn and try and understand what if they don't take action, this is what might happen. So I thought maybe we could have a little chat about kind of real world examples where you've done some youth engagement, or successful youth engagement, as we would call it, in climate services, and then maybe where you think young professionals like ourselves, I'm still including myself in that, can teach us about how climate services might need to evolve in the future. Where are we still kind of relying on the past, and how can we bring kind of that, we were talking about like TikTok and gaming and things like that, how can we bring climate services to the present and looking forward to the future?
I think we're still searching for the right way to go about this. I think what has helped so far is actually being in places where you could find young people. So, for example, the science festival I told you about, you can also ask them there what they think about certain products. We've also done a some research on how our image is with young people, and I think the insights from that were also applicable, to a much wider group of people, because we try to overcomplicate our communication. And probably if you think you're communicating in a way that tailors to I don't know, 12 to 14-year-old people, at least you're also reaching probably a bigger group than that, of people who do not understand, or who do not are not familiar with certain terminology that we use. So I think in that sense, the research we've done into younger generations has helped in shaping how we communicate our warnings, for example, maybe not using certain words that can be interpreted in several ways. We've also asked some students on inputs for the data exploration platform that I just mentioned. So I think that has been helpful so far, but I think there's still a lot of a lot of things we could do to improve. And I think a big part of that is also inviting them here, inviting them at the institute, going to schools and universities. We have a small task force now at KNMI who's looking into how to improve our educational activities. So I think that's a good first step.
Yeah, it's not just kind of going back to our backgrounds. It's not just maths and physicists. It is a wide range, and it's nice for the kids to be able to see that. And they're always surprised when I say, like, oh, I hated maths. It was like a confidence thing. I hated it. And you don't need to like maths to like work in climate science. So I always like to kind of promote that, because yeah, for a lot of people, kind of maths is a bit of a it's a confidence thing, I think. So yeah, it's really nice to see the kids actually come and see us in the school. And then one thing, kind of just picking up on, is AI potentially, is like, how do we make it relevant, and kind of going back to that question I asked about present future, is incorporating AI into climate services. And I was kind of thinking about it before the podcast, and I think for a lot of people today, AI is the first place they'll go to find climate information, whether it's an essay they've been asked to write, or they're just genuinely interested in climate information. I hope it's not the final destination. I hope maybe the KNMI website or the Met Office website, once they kind of get pushed towards it through AI, that'll be the final destination. But just wondered whether AI has featured in your work, or whether it's something that you've been thinking about.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of experience with AI. What I do see is sometimes, when I'm preparing for an interview or something, I ask for some input, like what kind of topics I could talk about, and then I see that often KNMI is mentioned as a trusted source, so that is good to see. Sometimes it's not, or yeah, it happens quite often that the numbers aren't quite right. So I do always tell students, please just go to our website if you're looking for trusted information. I am happy to see, though, that our own website and also our new data platform is also featured in these large language models. So, but for maybe, when I'm trying to write something in a simple way, I do sometimes do a check, like, okay, can you check if this is actually a B1 language level? Are there any improvements you could make? I think it's very helpful for that, to make it understandable for a wider group of people.
Yeah, and I think for climate services, it is those large language models, those kind of chatbots, that I see as the kind of the low hanging fruit of the AI climate services kind of combination. Is you've got these huge reports, and how can we make it easier for people to find the information they need? And I think using chatbots is a really good way of doing that. And AI's come along so fast. And
Yeah, I was thinking about when you mentioned like making climate change a little bit more personal. I was thinking about how the Swiss Meteorological Institute, when they communicate their scenarios, they actually use persona to communicate certain changes. So, for example, there's a boy who loves snowboarding, so all the changes connected to snow and snowfall, freezing days, they kind of have this storyline of him, and you kind of follow him and then see what climate changes are relevant for him. And I thought that was a very nice way to go about it, kind of um, group your scenario topics into categories and make it into a story. I think the storyline approach is, it's still, we're still a little bit new to it. We recently brought out a report that was a little bit more that used storylines a little bit more, but I think it's a helpful way to communicate, I think.
yeah, no, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to everyone listening for tuning into this episode of the Climate Europe 2 podcast. You can reach out to us on social media or by email at infoclimateeurope2@bsc.es. So until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember to subscribe for more conversations on climate services.